Something like 20 years, Orson Welles has been kicking up a lot of dust and excitement in show business. He's the man who panicked the country with his radio version of the invasion by those little men from Mars. His Mercury Theater productions are a significant part of Broadway's better efforts. And he's written, produced, directed, or starred in so many movies that it's difficult to list them all. Perhaps the most memorable being Citizen Kane. Without the talents of Orson Welles, now 40 years old, radio, the theater, and motion pictures would have been much, much duller. Mr. Welles has been spending much of his time in Europe since the end of the war. He returned to this country only a month ago with his wife, Paula Mori, an actress herself. They and their newborn daughter, she's just 12 days old, have set up housekeeping here at the Sulgrave in Midtown Manhattan. Good evening, Orson.
Hello, Ed.
I'm glad to see that you finally found yourself a home. You had a little trouble there for a while, didn't you?
A little trouble. Well, my goodness, Ed, it wasn't a little trouble. We were practically vagabonds for a while. I was afraid we weren't going to be able to keep this engagement because there wouldn't have been any place for us to be visited in.
Well, it must be nice to be home, isn't it?
Nice. I hate to keep quibbling with you, Ed, because nice isn't the word either. It's wonderful to be home.
Correction accepted. Why did you stay abroad so long, Orson?
Well, I don't know. I don't really know, because I didn't expect to stay so long. I didn't want to stay so long. A number of jobs came up that each one seemed interesting and each one led to another. And then I didn't feel as if I were away, Ed, because so many friends come to Europe and we read American newspapers and magazines all the time. As a matter of fact, I kept in touch with things in America much more closely in the last few years when I was abroad than I have in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Because one is so anxious to know what's going on. Now I don't know what's happened in America since I've been here. I haven't felt as though I've been away. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Tell me this, how did you find morale in the European countries where you've been spending your time?
Morale? Well,
yes.
You know, I've been in several countries, Ed, and each country, of course, is very different. You know better than I do. I find that morale pretty wonderful, considering how close those countries are to danger places in what we call the Cold War, and I think it's marvelous how much they've done, considering how much they've suffered.
What's Italy like these days?
Well, of course, a wonderful country to live in, and marvelous country to work in, but I'm a little disappointed in what's happened in the cultural life of Italy. It began more excitingly, I think. In the last few years, it's begun to fall off.
And France?
Well, France, of course, you know the saying, every good American, when he dies, goes to Paris. And everybody likes living in Paris. We have a flat there, Paula and myself, and love the city very much. But of course, maybe George Jessel was right when he said a little while ago that France is a country that's governed by the Marx Brothers. There does seem to be a little trouble over there in the government way, and it's a very rich country, but there is a despair there that is discouraging.
And England?
Well, I know we both love England, Ed.
We do.
We certainly do. I don't know why, really, because I adore the sun and hate bad weather, and I don't even like tea. But Paul and I both find England irresistible.
And Austria?
Well, Austria, I visited just this spring. Again, of course, I made a film there, Third Man, a few years ago, and I went back to see it at the time when the occupation forces were going, and it's still, of course, a delightful place. I made a curious discovery there, as a matter of fact. It seems to me that all the psychoanalysts have gone. I asked, where are they? And as far as I can discover, they're all in New York.
What made you come back home now, Orson?
Well, I don't know what kept me there so long, Ed. I know the reason I came back quickly now. Really, the Countess. The Countess is the heiress.
Yes.
And the Countess Tina. And it's all right, I think, to have a title, but I was very anxious for her to be born in America. And we made it in time, I'm glad to say.
Good. Tell me, is the theater still attractive to you? I mean, with radio and television and the movies?
Well, the theater is irresistible. You can't, I can't live without it myself. It's always been my home in show business, even during the years in which I've slummed in other mediums. You should excuse the expression. Anybody who starts in the theater never gives up loving it most, I think.
Well, what about your own plans for the theater?
Well, I have some rather ambitious ones, I'm afraid, because we're going to do 2 plays here in New York, King Lear,
yes,
Shakespeare's King Lear, and Volpone. Ben Jonson. This prop that you see me holding in my lap, you know, are some sketches that I've been doing for scenery and costumes for the shows. That's the walls outside of King Lear's castle.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a costume sketch. I have it upside down, if you will excuse me for a moment. This is a costume sketch of Corbaccio, the old miser in Volpone.
Do you always design your own sets?
No, not always, Ed. I do it sometimes, quite often. In this case, I did the sets and costumes because I had to prepare the shows in Europe before we came, and it would have been difficult to bring the designers over and then back again.
Mm-hmm. Orson, why are you so partial to the classics?
Well, I'm partial to the classics because I love them, but I'm doing the classics now in New York mostly because I think the rest of the theater is so well represented in America, and I do think the classics are a little bit neglected, perhaps, of recent years. In the old days in the Mercury, we did a lot of classic plays.
Well, there was another classic that you did, that Invasion from Mars. I'm sure everyone asked you about that.
Yes. Well, that was, I don't know whether it's a classic or not, but it was certainly an event of some sort. I don't know whether you're asking me a question about it or just leaving me to...
What prompted it?
What prompted it?
Yes.
Well, this may seem rather personal, Ed. I began to think that people were believing the radio too much. You know, there were voices from Europe and other places that were being accepted as absolutely ex cathedra. And I thought it would be fun to prove that the radio could lie along with everything else. I think it's about time somebody did a flying saucer scare on the TV, don't you? Maybe we believe that too much. Not you, sir, not you.
Would you describe yourself as somewhat unpredictable?
I describe the show business as somewhat unpredictable. And if I could predict what was happening in show business, I'd be as predictable as you could ask.
Does Mrs. Wells agree about this? By the way, where is she, Orson?
May I introduce her? Ed? She's here. Mrs. Paula.
Good evening, Mrs. Wells.
And
Good evening, Mr. Morrow.
Ed, she shouldn't be here, and I want Dr. Denham, if he happens to be viewing, to forgive me for permitting her to get out of bed because she had a little setback and she came out of the bedroom in a wheelchair to say hello.
Well, thank you very much. Tell me, Paula, how's the baby?
Oh, she's fine. She's beautiful and asleep.
Good. What's her name?
Beatrice Giuditta Mori di Gerfalco Wells.
What a wonderful name. This being your first trip to America, I don't suppose you've seen much more than New York so far, have you?
I'm sorry, I can't let her answer this, Ed, until I show a picture of the baby. I know it's corny.
All right.
Wait a minute.
Let's see it.
Excuse me. Because the baby's asleep, of course, no power on earth could have got her up there. There she is, you see.
Oh, wonderful.
Singing an aria.
Yeah.
Italian aria. She speaks only Italian. Right, go on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Paula, how do you like New York?
Oh, I love it. I think it's one of the most exciting cities I have ever seen.
Does it come up to your expectation?
Well, no. I thought it was much different. I thought it was less exciting, less beautiful, less wonderful.
Uh-huh.
It is a big
And
surprise.
more mechanical, you thought,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Oh, yes. And all
More
the shows
organized and more terrifying.
I think that New York is old-fashioned, and it's wonderful. because-
Old-fashioned?
Yes.
She means that in a nice word, Ed. You know, old-fashioned, as you know, is a nice word in Italy.
Yes.
It isn't a derogation. She's pleased to find that there are things in New York that remind her of the old things in Italy, and that are comfortable and easygoing and friendly. And she expected, I think, from films and that sort of thing, to find a great, slick, highly organized world of the future.
Yes.
And she's glad to recognize human things. Isn't that what you mean?
Mrs. Wells, are you going to continue your acting career?
Well, I don't know really, because now that I'm married and I have a baby, my career as an actress doesn't matter very much.
Well, I don't know. She's an awfully good actress, and I hope she will, Ed.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mrs. Wells, for letting us come and visit you, even though you're not feeling too well. Thank you very much. Orson,
Yes,
from
yes.
what I can determine, you're something of an individualist, aren't you? Is that a fair description?
Well, I don't know, Ed. I don't know much about myself. I suppose people ought to know about themselves. The Greeks told us we ought to. I don't spend much time trying to decide what I am. I'm very fond of individuals, though, and as against conformists and members of the gang. I hope I'm an individualist. I'd like to put it that way. Because I do think we live in an age when individualism is being discouraged, isn't it? You know, I think
Yes.
there's every sort of conspiracy all over the world, from totalitarianism to just plain social custom. There's every kind of discouragement offered the person who wants to be himself and not just one of the group.
Orson, there's something I've been wanting to ask you all evening. Do you think television has lived up to its potential?
Well, I don't, Ed. No, I don't. I think it's done wonderful things, and a disproportionate amount of those good things have been done by you. You forgive me for saying so, but I don't think so, considering it's... Are you asking about America or the world? Although
I'm asking about the world.
My answer would be the same, as a matter of fact. I think all over the world it's a medium maybe as important as the printing press was when it first bobbed up on the cultural horizon, and I don't think people quite realize how important and how dangerously important it is and how wonderfully important. I think it's too much a medium of casual entertainment and not enough one of serious exchange of ideas. I don't mean it should be solemn and boring and all of that, but I do think that there are new forms that haven't even been attempted in TV and that ought to be, and it's solidifying and crystallizing too quickly.
You feel it may be getting muscle-bound in infancy, is that?
Yes, middle-aged when it's still young.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm wrong. I don't know a lot about American television. I've just a few weeks of looking at it. I've seen very exciting things on it, but an awful lot of tripe, too, and I think more tripe than need be on it. I do think that TV is a medium of communication and exchange of ideas and of taking people to other places and showing them new things. And I think the comics and commentators and everybody else, they're wonderfully gifted and talented people working in front of these TV cameras. But I don't know that the whole medium has quite risen to this great historical occasion.
Well, Orson, thank you very much for letting us come and visit you and your charming wife tonight and exchange a few ideas. Thank you very much indeed, and a belated welcome home.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much. Good night, Paula.
Good night.
Good night.